The Galactic Assembly Hall stretched across 3 kilometers of polished crystal and living metal, a monument to the 1,000 species that had conquered the stars and built civilization among them. Ambassador Thurin of the Valkyrie Dominion stood at the center platform, his forearms folded across his armored thorax as he watched the human delegation enter through the eastern gate. He chittered softly to his aide, making no effort to hide his amusement. "Look at them," he said, his mandibles clicking with each word. "They walk as if they belong here, as if they have earned a place among us." The humans numbered only 5, led by a woman with dark hair, pulled back tight against her skull, and eyes that reflected nothing of the grandeur around her. Captain Elena Vasquez had served 30 years in the Terran Defense Force before accepting this diplomatic assignment, and she had learned long ago that impressive buildings meant nothing when the shooting started. She approached the central podium where representatives from across the galaxy had gathered to hear Earth's petition for protected trade status. The Valkyrie controlled the largest military force in the quadrant. Marthani held monopolies on FTL, fuel refinement. The crystalline collective processed 90% of all quantum computing substrates, and humanity controlled nothing except a single blue world at the edge of explored space and a handful of struggling colonies that barely sustained themselves. Thorne stepped forward before Vasquez could speak, his voice amplified by the hall's acoustic systems. "Before we waste time on formalities," he announced to the gathered delegates, "perhaps our human visitors would like to explain why we should grant trade protection to a species that cannot even protect itself." Vasquez kept her expression neutral. She had expected this. Every briefing had warned her that the Valkyrie would try to humiliate Earth's delegation publicly. The Terran Confederacy seeks trade partnerships based on mutual benefit. She replied, her voice steady. "We offer unique biological compounds, cultural exchanges, and access to what exactly?" Thorin interrupted, his chittering laughter echoing through the hall. "Your primitive weapons, perhaps, your chemical propulsion systems. Your warships that still use kinetic projectiles like cave dwellers throwing rocks." A ripple of amusement passed through the assembly. The Morthani delegates' facial tendrils quivered with suppressed mirth. Even the normally stoic crystalline representatives flickered with patterns that suggested entertainment. Vasquez did not flinch. "Our weapons are functional and reliable." Functional. Thurin repeated the word as if tasting something foul. "Let me educate you on what functional means to civilized species, Captain." He gestured, and a holographic display materialized above the central platform, showing a Valkyrie battlecruiser in exquisite detail. "This is the pride of Valkar, flagship of our grand fleet. It carries 48 plasma lance batteries capable of sustained fire for 72 hours without cooldown. Its quantum disruptors can destabilize molecular bonds at ranges exceeding 50,000 kilometers. Its shields can absorb the energy output of a small star." The display shifted to show a human vessel, the blocky and utilitarian profile of a Terran destroyer. "And this is one of your warships. It carries magnetic accelerators that throw metal slugs, chemical rockets with explosive warheads, point defense cannons that require physical ammunition which will eventually run out." Thurin turned to face Vasquez directly, his compound eyes glittering with contempt. "Do you see the difference, Captain? Do you understand why the Assembly views your petition as a joke? You ask us to invest resources in protecting trade routes for a species that would be annihilated in minutes by any serious threat." The Assembly Hall fell silent, waiting for the human response. Vasquez took a slow breath. "Ambassador Thorin," she said quietly, "how many species has the Valkyrie Dominion seen destroyed by the Harvesters?" The chittering laughter stopped. Thorin's mandibles went still. "That is not relevant to this discussion." "I think it is very relevant," Vasquez continued. "The historical records show that in the past 10,000 years, over 60 civilizations have been completely consumed by harvester swarms. Most of them had energy weapons far more advanced than anything in your grand fleet. The plasma lances did not save them. The quantum disruptors did not save them. Their shields did not save them. She stepped closer to the Velkari ambassador, her voice carrying clearly through the silent hall. So I ask you, ambassador, what makes you so certain that you're advanced? Weapons will fare any better. Thurin's upper arms twitched with anger. The harvesters have not entered Velkari space in over 300 years. Our military presence deters them. Or perhaps they are simply not hungry yet. The words hung in the air like a threat. Aaron recovered his composure with visible effort. Turning back to address the full assembly, the human captain attempts to frighten us with old stories. He declared, "The harvesters are a manageable threat, contained and monitored. They pose no danger to established powers, only to weak species on the fringes of civilization." He fixed Vasquez with a cold stare. "Species like yours, when the harvesters come for you?" Vasquez replied calmly, "And they will come, because they always do. I hope your plasma lances keep you warm in the long dark. But if they do not, if you find yourselves desperate and dying, remember that the humans and their primitive weapons offered friendship today. Remember that you laughed at us." She turned and walked toward the exit, her delegation falling into step behind her. Thorin called after her, his voice sharp with mockery. "Where are you going, Captain? The assembly has not dismissed you." Vasquez paused at the doorway. "You have already dismissed us." "Ambassador, everything else is just formality. But I want you to remember something." She looked back over her shoulder, her expression unreadable. "Humans have survived ice ages, plagues, famines, and wars that killed billions of our own kind. We survived not because we were the strongest or the smartest, but because we refused to die. We made do with what we had. We adapted. We kept fighting long after any reasonable creature would have surrendered." Her voice hardened. "Our weapons may be primitive by your standards, but they work, and when everything else fails, when your elegant technology betrays you, we will still be throwing rocks, and those rocks will still be killing whatever needs to be killed." She walked out of the assembly hall without looking back. The delegates murmured among themselves, amused by the dramatic exit of the primitive species that dared to lecture its betters. Thorin dismissed the encounter with a wave of his upper arms. "Humans," he said to his aide, "too stubborn to know when they are beaten. They will learn when the galaxy finally teaches them their place. They will learn 6 months later, when the sky above Velkar Prime turned black with harvester drones." Thorin would remember those words. He would remember the human captain's warning, and he would understand, far too late, that he had made a terrible mistake. The warning came at midnight. Galactic Standard Time deep space sensors at the edge of Velkari territory detected an anomaly. A ripple in the fabric of space that could only mean one thing. Something was coming through from dark space. Kethver stood on the command deck of the Pride of Velkar, watching the sensor displays with growing unease as the readings climbed higher and higher. "How large is the emergence?" "Signature," he demanded. His tactical officer's mandibles trembled as he processed the data. "Sir, the readings must be wrong. The sensors show a mass equivalent to a small moon. Check them again." "I have checked them 7 times, Admiral." "The signature is accurate." Kethver felt his thorax constrict with fear he had not experienced since he was a hatchling in 300 years. The harvesters had never sent more than a minor swarm into Velkari space, easily driven off by patrol fleets and planetary defense platforms. This signature suggested something far worse. "Alert the Grand Fleet," he ordered. "All ships to combat stations and send word to the assembly. Tell them the harvesters have returned in force." The emergence point tore open like a wound in reality from the darkness beyond. They came, billions of them. The harvester swarm poured through the rift in an endless tide of metal and malice. Each drone a self-contained killing machine designed by some long-dead intelligence to consume all organic life. It Encountered, they ranged in size from small attack units no larger than a human fist to massive factory cores the size of cities, mobile production facilities that converted raw matter into more drones. The swarm moved with terrible purpose, spreading across the system like a plague of locusts descending on a field of grain. Cather watched the tactical display fill with red markers until the screen was almost solid crimson. All ships, he broadcast to the Grand Fleet. This is Admiral Kethvar. We face the greatest harvester incursion in recorded history. But we are Valkyrie. We have the finest weapons in the quadrant. We will not yield our territory to mindless machines. 2,000 warships of the Valkyrie Grand Fleet moved into formation, their sleek hulls gleaming with power as weapons. Systems came online: plasma, lance batteries charged to full capacity, quantum disruptors locked onto target shield, generators hummed with enough energy to stop a small meteor. All ships fire at will. Kethvar commanded the first salvo was magnificent. Thousands of plasma beams lanced across the void, carving through harvested drones by the hundreds. The quantum disruptors fired in precise bursts, destabilizing molecular bonds and reducing targets to clouds of dissociated atoms. For a brief moment, Kethvar felt hope. Then the swarm adapted. The drones began to disperse, spreading out so that each plasma beam could only hit a single target instead of burning through multiple units. They moved in chaotic patterns that confused targeting systems, designed for predictable enemy behavior. And for every drone destroyed, 3 more emerged from the factory cores. Concentrate fire on the production units, Kethvar ordered. Destroy their ability to replenish losses. The Grand Fleet redirected its attack, focusing massive amounts of firepower on the nearest factory core. Plasma lances hammered against its hull, superheating the metal until it glowed white. Quantum disruptors struck at critical systems for 30 minutes. The combined firepower of 100 warships battered the factory core without mercy. The factory core survived. Its outer layers had been designed to absorb and redirect energy attacks, converting the incoming plasma into fuel for its internal reactors. The quantum disruptors caused damage, but repair drones swarmed over the hull, rebuilding faster than the weapons could destroy. Meanwhile, the smaller attack drones had reached the fleet. They did not try to destroy the Valkyrie ships directly. Instead, they attached themselves to hulls by the thousands, drilling through armor plating to reach power conduits and computer systems. Pride of Valkyrie shuddered as drones breached its outer hull. Seal all compartments, Kethvar shouted. Security teams to breach points, but the drones were already inside, crawling through corridors, cutting through bulkheads, heading for the bridge and the reactor core with single-minded determination. One by one, ships across the Grand Fleet went silent. Their plasma lances fell dark as drones severed power connections. Their shields flickered and died as generators were destroyed from within. Their crews fought with sidearms and improvised weapons, but the drones were endless, pouring through every breach like water through a broken dam. Kethvar watched the tactical display as friendly markers winked out of existence. 500 ships gone in the first hour, 1,000 by the second. By the third hour, only scattered survivors remained, fleeing toward the inner system while the swarm consumed everything behind them. Send a message, Kethvar gasped, his ship dying around him. Send it to every inhabited world in range. Tell them the Valkyrie have fallen. Tell them the harvesters cannot be stopped. Tell them to flee while they still can. The communication officer transmitted the warning with trembling claws. The message went out across 1,000 channels, reaching dozens of species who had watched the battle through long-range sensors. Most responded with silence, already calculating evacuation routes and survival probabilities. One response came back almost immediately. This is the Terran Third Fleet. Hold position. We are en route to assist. Cathver stared at the message in disbelief. The humans were coming, those primitive fools with their kinetic weapons and chemical rockets were flying toward the greatest harvester swarm in recorded history. Respond to the human fleet, he ordered weakly. Tell them not to come. Tell them they will only add to the slaughter. But before the message could be sent, harvester drones breached the bridge. Admiral Cathver died with his ship. Another victim of the ancient enemy that had consumed 1,000 civilizations before his. The swarm continued its advance, moving toward the inner planets where billions of Valkyrie civilians huddled in shelters, praying to gods who could not help them. And somewhere in the void, 47 human warships accelerated to maximum speed, their crews loading weapons that the rest of the galaxy considered obsolete. Captain Elena Vasquez stood on the bridge of the TFS Defiance, watching the long-range sensor feeds with grim determination. How long until we reach engagement range? She asked. 14 hours at current speed. Captain, push the engines harder. I want us there in 12. Her first officer approached, speaking quietly so the rest of the bridge crew could not hear. Captain, you know what we are flying into? The entire Valkyrie Grand Fleet was destroyed in hours. We have 47 ships against billions of drones. Vasquez nodded slowly. I know. Then why are we going? These are the same people who laughed at us, who called us primitives, who refused to help us. Vasquez turned to face her officer, her expression hard but not without compassion. Because if we do not stop them here, they will come for us next. Because showing mercy to those who showed us none is what separates humans from monsters. And because somewhere down there, billions of civilians are dying while we have the ability to help. She looked back at the sensor display. Besides, I want to see the look on their faces when our primitive weapons save their lives. The fleet continued toward the battle, carrying humanity's answer to 10,000 years of galactic contempt. Rocks were about to fall and something was about to die. The Terran Third Fleet emerged from FTL like a fist punching through reality. 47 ships. Their hulls thick and ugly compared to the elegant curves of the destroyed Valkyrie warships. Their designs built for function rather than beauty. Admiral James Okonkwo stood at the center of the TFS Defiance command deck, his dark eyes scanning the tactical displays as data poured in from every sensor on the ship. What he saw should have terrified him. The harvester swarm stretched across millions of kilometers, a cloud of death so vast that it dimmed the light from distant stars. Billions of drones moved in shifting patterns, accompanied by dozens of factory cores that churned out new units without pause. Scattered among the swarm were the remains of the Valkyrie Grand Fleet, broken hulls and debris fields marking where 2,000 warships had met their end. Admiral, his tactical officer reported, I am detecting approximately 4 billion active harvester units, 63 factory cores. The swarm is currently advancing on the third planet at a velocity of 15,000 kilometers per hour. Time until they reach civilian population centers. 8 hours at current speed. Okonkwo nodded slowly. 8 hours. 47 ships, 4 billion enemies. He had faced worse odds in simulations, never in reality. But there was a first time for everything. All ships, he broadcast to the fleet. This is Admiral Okonkwo. I will not waste time with speeches. You know why we are here? You know what we face. The galaxy thinks our weapons are primitive and our tactics are outdated. Today, we prove them wrong. He paused, letting his words sink in. Load kinetic packages. Target the factory cores first. We cut off their ability to produce reinforcements. Then we clean up what remains. Missile crews prepare nuclear payloads for saturation bombardment. Point defense systems to maximum readiness. Across the fleet, crews moved with practiced efficiency massive tungsten slugs. each one 3 meters long and weighing several tons, were loaded into magnetic accelerator chambers missile bays, open to reveal hundreds of warheads, each carrying enough nuclear material to vaporize a small city. Rotating cannons spun up to operational speed, ready to fill the void with thousands of high-velocity rounds per minute. The harvester swarm detected the new arrivals and began to shift course. Analytical subroutines evaluated the threat. 47 vessels of unknown configuration using primitive kinetic weapon systems. Threat level: minimal energy shielding. Unnecessary. The swarm continued its advance, with only a minor detachment breaking off to deal with the newcomers. Akanka watched the enemy approach and smiled grimly. They are not taking us seriously. No, sir, his tactical officer agreed. They are sending approximately 50 million drones to intercept. Less than 2% of their total force. Good. That means they will not be expecting what comes next. All ships, fire on my command. The fleet held position, waiting as the harvester detachment closed the distance. 10,000 kilometers, 5,000 fire, every railgun in the fleet discharged simultaneously. The effect was instantaneous and catastrophic. Tungsten slugs accelerated to 3% of light speed, crossed the remaining distance in a fraction of a second. Too fast for any defensive system to track or intercept. The projectiles did not burn out like plasma beams. They did not dissipate like quantum disruptor pulses. They were simply mass moving at tremendous velocity, carrying enough kinetic energy to punch through anything in their path. The first salvo hit the harvester formation like the fist of an angry god. Each slug tore through drone after drone. Its momentum barely diminished as it passed through relatively thin machine bodies. A single projectile could destroy dozens of units before finally coming to rest. 50 million drones became 40 million in the first second, 30 million by the third. The swarm tried to adapt, dispersing into wider patterns to minimize damage from each projectile. But the humans had anticipated this response. Missile cruise, Okonkwo ordered. Saturation pattern, fire. Hundreds of missiles launched from the fleet, their chemical propulsion systems burning hot as they accelerated toward the dispersed swarm. The harvesters did not fear missiles. Energy weapons could intercept them easily. Shields could absorb their impacts, but these missiles did not carry conventional warheads. Nuclear detonations bloomed across the void like a string of new stars. The explosions themselves destroyed thousands of drones, but the real damage came from the electromagnetic pulses that accompanied each blast. Harvester units relied on constant communication with their command network, coordinating movements and sharing tactical data in real time. The EMP bursts severed those connections. Suddenly, millions of drones were operating independently. Their coordination shattered, their adaptive responses delayed by crucial seconds. The railguns fired again and again and again. Each salvo carved bloody furrows through the swarm, destroying machines by the hundreds of thousands, while the nuclear bombardment continued to disrupt their ability to respond. The harvester analytical systems struggled to process what was happening. These weapons were primitive. They should not be effective. Energy shielding rendered kinetic attacks obsolete, but the humans had no energy weapons to defend against. Their projectiles carried no energy signatures to absorb or redirect. They were just metal, moving very fast. And the swarm had no defense against simple physics. Admiral, the tactical officer reported with barely contained excitement. The detachment is retreating. They are falling back to the main swarm. Do not let them regroup. All ships advance. Continue firing. I want those factory cores in range within the hour. The Terran fleet pushed forward, railguns blazing, missiles streaming ahead to clear the path. The swarm tried to intercept them with massed drone attacks. But the human point defense systems proved equally devastating. Thousands of rounds per minute filled the space around each ship, creating walls of metal that shredded anything that came close. A harvester attack drone approached the TFS. Defiance at high-speed point defense cannons tracked and fired the drone, disintegrated into fragments before it could reach the hull. Another approached, then another, then 100 more. The cannons never stopped firing shell. Casings accumulated in collection bins designed to recycle the spent brass. Fresh ammunition fed from magazines that held millions of rounds, sir, the weapons officer reported. Point defense ammunition at 87% capacity, railgun slugs at 91%, missile reserves at 73%. Okonkwo nodded with satisfaction. Valkyrie had lost their fleet when their power cores were drained, and their weapons overheated. Human weapons did not rely on power cores, they relied on having enough metal to throw, and humanity had brought a lot of metal. The first factory core is entering range, the tactical officer announced. All railguns concentrate fire on that target. I want it reduced to scrap. 47 ships turned their main batteries toward the massive production facility. Magnetic accelerators hummed with power as tungsten slugs chambered for firing. Fire. The factory core, which had survived hours of Valkyrie plasma bombardment, lasted exactly 47 seconds under the concentrated kinetic assault. Tungsten penetrators punched through its armored hull, tearing through internal machinery, destroying reactor cores and production lines. The factory core broke apart, spilling drones and debris into the void. A cheer went up across the fleet. 1 down, 62 to go. Main swarm finally recognized the threat and began to converge on the human fleet. Billions of drones turned away from the Valkyrie homeworld, drawn toward these strange attackers who had somehow wounded the unkillable enemy. Okonkwo watched them come without fear. Now we have their attention, he said quietly. Good. Every drone chasing us is a drone not killing civilians. All ships maintain formation. Continue targeting factory cores. We end this today. The Battle of Velkar Prime had entered its second phase, and humanity was winning. Ambassador Thuren watched the battle from the observation deck of the Galactic Assembly Station, his mandibles hanging open in disbelief around him. Representatives from a dozen species stood in similar states of shock, their eyes fixed on the holographic display that showed real-time sensor data from the Valkyrie system. The humans were not supposed to be winning. No one won against the harvesters. Not really. You fled, you hid. You sacrificed colonies to buy time for evacuation. You did not charge directly into a swarm of 4 billion drones and start killing them by the millions. This is impossible, murmured the Morthani delegate, his facial tendrils writhing with agitation. Their weapons are primitive. They use chemical propulsion and kinetic projectiles. How are they destroying factory cores that survived our combined plasma bombardment? A crystalline collective observer flickered with rapid patterns of light, running calculations through its silicon-based neural network. The humans exploit a fundamental flaw in harvester defensive design, the crystalline announced in its emotionless synthetic voice. All galactic civilizations transitioned to energy weapons approximately 12,000 years ago. The harvesters adapted their defenses accordingly. Their hulls absorb and redirect energy attacks. Their dispersal patterns minimize damage from directed beams. The crystalline paused, patterns shifting to indicate surprise, but they have no defense against kinetic impacts. Their hulls are optimized for thermal and electromagnetic resistance, not physical penetration. The human projectiles pass through them like needles through cloth. Thorin felt cold spreading through his thorax. He remembered standing in this very hall 6 months ago. Laughing at the human captain and her primitive weapons, he remembered calling them cave dwellers throwing rocks. The rocks were winning. A Valkyrie science officer approached Thurin, his mandibles clicking rapidly with barely controlled panic. Ambassador, I have been analyzing the human tactical approach. I believe I understand why their weapons are so effective. Explain. Our plasma lenses require enormous power reserves. We can fire continuously for 72 hours, but then we must recharge for at least 12. Our quantum disruptors overheat after sustained use. Our shields drain energy with every impact they absorb. The science officer pulled up a technical diagram of a human warship. The human weapons have no such limitations. Their railguns use electromagnetic acceleration to launch solid projectiles. The power requirements are minimal compared to plasma generation. They can fire until they physically run out of ammunition, and they carry thousands of rounds. He zoomed in on the missile bays. Their nuclear warheads are even simpler. Chemical propulsion requires no ship power at all. The weapons are completely self-contained. Each missile carries its own fuel and its own energy in the form of fissile material. The humans could fire their entire payload and still have full power. Reserves for combat maneuvering. Thurin stared at the diagram, understanding dawning with horrible clarity. We abandoned kinetic weapons because energy weapons were more elegant. He said slowly, more sophisticated, more powerful in direct comparisons. Yes, Ambassador, but we never considered what happens when elegance fails, when sophistication is countered. When the enemy has spent 10,000 years learning to defeat exactly the kind of weapons we use. No, Ambassador, we did not on the display. Another factory core exploded under concentrated human fire that made 17 destroyed in the past 4 hours. The swarm was still enormous, still dangerous, but for the first time in recorded history, it was shrinking faster than it could replenish itself. The humans had found the weakness that 1,000 civilizations had missed, and they had found it because they were too poor, too primitive, too stubborn to upgrade to weapons. That would have made them just another victim Thurin thought about. All the species that had been consumed by the harvesters over the millennia, the Valkyrie had records of many of them, proud civilizations with advanced technology, gleaming fleets, weapons that could crack planets. All of them gone. All of them had made the same assumption that he had made about the humans. Kinetic weapons were obsolete, energy weapons were. Superior progress meant abandoning the old ways, but progress had created a blind spot, a vulnerability that the harvesters had exploited for 10,000 years, and humanity, too poor to progress, too stubborn to change, had accidentally preserved the one weapon system that could actually hurt the ancient enemy. Contact the human fleet. Thurin ordered suddenly. I want to speak with their commander, Ambassador. Our communication systems are still damaged from the initial attack. We can receive, but we cannot transmit clearly. Then find a way. Use courier drones if you must. I need to speak with them. The science officer hesitated. What will you say? Ambassador. Thurin watched the battle for a long moment before answering. I will apologize, he said finally. I will tell them that they were right and I was wrong. I will offer whatever assistance the Valkyrie Dominion can provide, and I will ask them, very humbly, if they might be willing to share their primitive weapons with the rest of us. The science officer's mandibles clicked with surprise. Ambassador. The Council would never approve of adopting human technology. It would be seen as a step backward, a humiliation. Then the Council can explain to our citizens why we let pride cost us our civilization. Thurin turned away from the display. I mocked Captain Vasquez because her weapons were simple, because her people were poor, because they refused to abandon the tools of their ancestors for something newer and shinier. He paused at the doorway. Looking back at the assembled delegates, I understand now why humanity survived when so many others did not. It was never about having the best weapons. It was about having weapons that work, simple tools, reliably applied, that do exactly what they are designed to do. The Morthani delegates stirred uncomfortably. You speak as if we should all return to throwing rocks. Perhaps we should. Thorin replied. At least rocks do not overheat. They do not require power cores. They do not become useless when an enemy learns to absorb their energy. He looked at the display one more time, watching human missiles streak toward another factory core. The humans taught me something today, he said quietly. Something I should have learned long ago. The universe does not care about elegance. It does not reward sophistication. It only respects results. He straightened his thorax. Decision made. And right now, the only species getting results is the one we laughed at 6 months ago. Perhaps it is time we stopped laughing and started learning. Ambassador Thorin walked out of the observation deck, leaving the other delegates to watch the impossible victory unfold behind him on the display. The 23rd Factory Core died under human fire. The swarm was breaking, and the galaxy was learning a lesson it would never forget. The battle lasted 3 days, 3 days of constant firing, of nuclear detonations lighting up the void, of tungsten slugs tearing through machine bodies like paper. 3 days of the Harvester swarm throwing everything it had against 47 human warships that simply refused to die. Admiral Okonkwo had not slept in 60 hours. His uniform was stained with coolant and carbon scoring from when a Harvester drone had breached the outer hull and nearly reached the bridge. His voice was hoarse from shouting orders over the constant thunder of railgun fire, but he was still standing, and so was his fleet. Admiral, his tactical officer reported, exhaustion evident in every word. The last factory core has been destroyed, without production capacity. The remaining drones cannot replenish their numbers. Okonkwo looked at the tactical display where once there had been billions of red markers. Now there were only millions, still a massive force by any normal standard. But the swarm was dying. Bleeding drones with every passing minute as human weapons continued their relentless assault. How many did we lose? He asked. 7 ships destroyed. Admiral, 14 more with significant damage. Total crew casualties estimated at 2,300. 2,300 lives. Okonkwo closed his eyes for a moment, honoring the fallen they had known. The risks when they volunteered for this mission, they had come anyway. That was what it meant to be human. The swarm is attempting to retreat toward the dark space emergence point. The tactical officer continued. If they escape, they will return with reinforcements. Then we do not let them escape. All ships pursue. We finish this today. The battered Terran fleet pushed forward, chasing the fleeing remnants of the greatest Harvester swarm in recorded history. For 12 more hours they hunted, destroying stragglers, cutting off escape routes, herding the survivors toward the rift in space from which they had emerged when the last major concentration of drones made a desperate push for the dark space portal. Okonkwo gave his final order. Launch everything we have left. Collapse that rift. Every remaining nuclear warhead in the fleet streaked toward the emergence point. The detonations came in rapid succession. Dozens of nuclear explosions concentrated on a single point in space. The dark space portal, destabilized by the massive energy release, collapsed in on itself. The rift sealed the last Harvester drones, cut off from escape and surrounded by human warships, were destroyed within the hour. Silence fell across the Velkari system for the first time in 3 days. The guns stopped firing. Admiral Okonkwo sat down heavily in his command chair, feeling every one of his 57 years. It is done, he said quietly. The swarm is destroyed. A cheer went up across the fleet. transmitted from ship to ship as crews celebrated their impossible victory. But Okonkwo did not celebrate. He thought about the 2,300 who would never go home. He thought about the billions of Valkyrie civilians who had survived because human ships arrived in time. He thought about Captain Vasquez, standing alone in the assembly hall while aliens laughed at her primitive weapons. "Sir," the communications officer called out, "we are receiving a transmission from the Galactic Assembly Station. Ambassador Thurin is requesting permission to speak with you directly." Okonkwo almost laughed. The same ambassador who had mocked humanity 6 months ago now wanted to talk. Put him through. The holographic display flickered, and Thurin's image appeared on the bridge. The Valkyrie ambassador looked different somehow. Smaller, less arrogant. His mandibles were still. His compound eyes dimmed with something that might have been shame. "Admiral Okonkwo," Thurin began, his voice lacking its former contempt. "On behalf of the Valkyrie Dominion and the Galactic Assembly, I offer our deepest gratitude for your intervention. You have saved billions of lives today. We did what needed to be done." Okonkwo replied flatly, "You did what no one else could do," Thurin corrected. "What no one else would do. We laughed at your weapons, called them primitive, dismissed your people as cave dwellers, and you came to save us anyway." He paused, struggling with words that did not come easily. "I owe Captain Vasquez an apology. I owe your entire species an apology. We were wrong about you, about your weapons, about everything." Okonkwo studied the ambassador for a long moment. "You want to know why we came?" he said finally. "Why we risked our ships and our people for a civilization that treated us with contempt? Yes, I confess I do not understand, because that is who we are," Okonkwo said simply. "Humans do not abandon others to die. Not even those who have wronged us. We help because we can, because it is the right thing to do, because we remember what it was like when we had no one to help us." He leaned forward in his chair. "And we came because we knew our weapons would work. We knew because we never forgot the most basic truth of combat. It does not matter how sophisticated your technology is. What matters is whether you can kill the enemy before they kill you." Thurin's mandibles clicked softly. "Your railguns and nuclear weapons achieved what our plasma lances and quantum disruptors could not. The irony is not lost on me." "It should not be irony," Okonkwo replied. "It should be a lesson. The harvesters adapted to your weapons because you gave them 10,000 years to do so. Every species in the galaxy uses essentially the same technology, the same principles, the same weaknesses. You created a monoculture of warfare, and the harvesters learned to exploit it." He gestured at his ship around him. "Humanity never joined your monoculture. We were too poor, too isolated, too stubborn. We kept our kinetic weapons because we could not afford anything else, and in doing so, we accidentally preserved the one thing the harvesters did not know how to fight: mass and momentum." Thurin said quietly. Simple physics, Okonkwo agreed. "The universe does not care about elegance, Ambassador. A rock moving fast enough will kill you just as dead as a quantum disruptor. And rocks are much harder to run out of." Thurin was silent for a long moment. "The Assembly will convene tomorrow to discuss Earth's application for protected trade status," he said finally. "I intend to speak in favor of approval. I suspect there will be no opposition this time. That would be appreciated. I also intend to propose a technology exchange program." Thurin continued. "The Valkyrie Dominion wishes to acquire human kinetic weapon systems. We will offer our own technology in exchange. Whatever you require." Okonkwo raised an eyebrow. "You want to buy our primitive weapons. I want to ensure that my people never face the harvesters without adequate defenses again." Thurin replied. "If that means adopting human technology, then my pride can accept the cost. I have learned that pride is a poor shield against extinction. The Admiral nodded slowly. We can discuss terms. But I want something else as well. Name it. I want the Assembly to remember what happened here. I want them to remember that the species they dismissed as primitives saved them from annihilation. I want them to understand that being different is not the same as being inferior. Thorin's mandibles curved in what might have been a smile. That lesson has already been learned. Admiral, I do not think the galaxy will forget it anytime soon. The communication ended, and Okonkwo slumped back in his chair around him. His crew continued the work of securing the system and tending to the wounded in the distance. The debris of the harvester swarm drifted silently through space. Testament to humanity's greatest military victory, Captain Vasquez appeared on the bridge. Having transferred from her ship to coordinate the fleet's return home, she stood beside Okonkwo's chair. Looking out at the stars, we did it, she said quietly. We actually did it. We threw rocks until something fell down. Okonkwo replied with a tired smile. Just like you told them we would, Vasquez nodded. Think they learned their lesson. I think they learned that underestimating humans is a dangerous mistake. Whether that lesson sticks remains to be seen. He stood, stretching muscles that had been locked in tension for 3 days. But whatever happens next, the galaxy knows what we are capable of now. They know that when everything else fails, when elegant solutions and sophisticated technology prove useless, humans will still be standing. He looked at Vasquez with pride. Still throwing rocks. Still throwing rocks. She agreed the Terran Third Fleet began its journey home, leaving behind a saved civilization and a changed galaxy, and across 1,000 worlds. Species who had never given humanity a second. Thought began to look at their own weapon systems with new eyes. Perhaps it was time to reconsider the value of simplicity. Perhaps it was time to remember that the universe respected results, not elegance. Perhaps it was time to start throwing rocks again. The humans had shown them the way now. It was up to the galaxy to follow.